It's Tuesday night. You're tuned into the best in anomalous talk radio. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Joining us for the next 2 hours, Sam Baltrusis, Provoking Evil, A Cautionary Tale. That was the name of a new episode of, the 100th episode of A Haunting. We're going to talk about Sam's experience with that in just a few minutes. Sam is the author of Wicked Salem and the upcoming Ghost Writers slotted for October 2019. He's penned 11 historical-based ghost books, and he has been featured on several national TV shows, including Destination America's Haunted Towns and the Travel Channel's A Haunting, Haunted USA Salem, and the Most Terrifying Places in America. He has served as Boston's paranormal expert on the Biography Channel's Haunted Encounters. He is here tonight to share his firsthand perspective of a very chilling case. Welcome to the show, Sam. Thank you for being here tonight.
Hey, Dave. How's it going?
It's going well. It's going well. You know, just in the last segment, we were talking about haunted possessions, haunted dolls, and I've got a collection of probably 40 of them in my garage that have been given to me from people that just don't want them. And I'm just curious, what's your perspective on haunted objects and cursed items? Is that something you encounter or have encountered?
Yeah, I mean, I've written 11 books, so I have definitely had experiences with objects that are allegedly, cursed or had something attached to them. I would say that, my specialty definitely is, I would say, like, more locations as opposed to objects that are enchanted. Sure. However, I have encountered, like, say, enchanted mirrors and things like that. So I do think, like, say, mirrors would be more prone to enchantment or, having something attached to it as opposed to, say, a doll. However, Annabelle, of course, is the quintessential, haunted doll.
Oh, you've got Robert the doll as well. There's been a couple of strange dolls that have really made ripples in history. Why do you think that something would be attached to an item like a doll or a piece of furniture or jewelry? Do you think that it really is the spirit of the past, or do you believe that it's more just a residual energy that's, kind of like walking through a room after somebody that's been smoking in there has left? You can still smell that funk of cigarettes in the air. Doesn't mean that the person's still there, but there's that essence that's left behind.
Yeah, I think this definitely the residual energy attached to it, especially if it's an object that was very much important to a person or to an individual who has passed. I did have an example in my new Ghost Writers where I go to a haunted hotel and it was in Bangor, Maine that I went to, and I was actually writing a section on Stephen King. And in this hotel, the Charles Inn, there's a doll that apparently has an attachment of a young girl, and I encountered this young girl when I was at the Charles Inn, and really? I think she loved the doll, and I think she, did she own that doll? Probably not. She probably became attached to it in the afterlife. But I have encountered things that I would say that would be lingering when they were, like, say it was an object that they loved when they were alive, and it just kind of, their energy is still attached to it. And then I've also encountered objects that have kind of attracted spirits in the afterlife, like especially with children's spirits, they're going to latch onto a doll because they like the doll.
It's sad to me. It's always been very heartbreaking to think that there are children's spirits that still walk this earth. What do you make of that? The idea and concept that a child would be left behind or forgotten?
Well, I think with children, especially the ones that I've encountered, they don't know how to cross to the light. And I think that, unfortunately, I've seen it more than your average person because I'm a clairvoyant. So I actually physically, I interact with the spirits. So the younger ones, they don't know how to cross. And I don't feel comfortable enough to cross them over to the light, but I do think that it's an issue of them not knowing that they're dead or that they're afraid to cross to the light.
See, I guess that's where it gets even more chilling to me. You would like to think that if there's a God, he wouldn't leave the spirits of children behind. They wouldn't be lost.
Right.
The concept of them not understanding how to cross over. It just seems, if they're the innocents, that they would be among the first to be collected. And I've had a couple of mediums convey a different aspect to me. They're saying, well, you're assuming that this is the soul's first time through and that these are really children. And they may have died as a child, but it could have been a reincarnated spirit that's on its 12th lifetime. And this is a very old spirit. I've tried to use that as a way to quell my concerns and fears. But it's still, especially when we've captured and heard the voices of crying children, children calling out for help, that always, more than anything, I think unnerves me. Well, it doesn't hurt that Hollywood has tainted us to the sound of, ghost children become even more terrifying in movies, right, than they are in real life. But it's,
absolutely, yeah,
that's kind of painted a new imagery for us in the way that we perceive those moments. How long have you been interested in the paranormal?
Well, I was a journalist for many years, and I would say definitely I was like the kid from The Shining. So when I watched The Shining when I was a kid, the movie before I read the book, I'm like, that's totally me. And I went through years where I put on paranormal blinders. So I was having experiences as I was growing up, and I would just kind of pretend like it didn't exist. And then as I got older, I actually started drinking alcohol to kind of deal with the paranormal aspect. So when I got sober is when the floodgates opened for me, and that was 10 years ago. So I was working on a book, my first book, and I basically wrote an article for a local magazine that turned into my first book, Goes to Boston, and I wrote extremely skeptical. Like, I was trying to be skeptical when I was writing that first book and really focus on the history and less on the ghost lore. And as you see with my books as they progress, they are definitely more. You can see me kind of either evolve or devolve as the years go by. So I went from like very skeptical, but kind of believing, to someone that believes full throttle that ghosts do exist.
All right. Well, then let's get to your definition. What does it mean to say ghost, in your opinion?
Right. It's very different for different. So I think every situation's a different scenario. I think I am a big believer. So there's different ideas that there's sort of like energy that's lingering from the living person, and that is what I started off believing, that it was a residual, like a psychic imprint, as opposed to like a lost soul that's walking the earth. And we talk about the children spirits. It could be that. It could be more of a residual haunting, and I think we talked about this the last time I talked to you. So I'm more in the school of residual. However, there are other things that are earthbound, that are kind of like lost souls kind of idea. And then there's thought forms as well, which I tend to think that thought forms is kind of what I am encountering, especially with the bad stuff.
Now, talking about the bad stuff, I just had a chance to watch the 100th episode of A Haunting, and saw your story unfold, which was really alarming, especially for somebody like you that, you've been interested in the paranormal for so long, fascinated by it, and to have something kind of blindside you this way. Let's dive into the story, if you don't mind, and kind of introduce us to the location and the history of the location before we dive into what happened to you.
Yeah, so basically, because I focus on Salem, my book Goes to Salem was a huge hit and kind of catapulted me as like the leading person to go to when it comes to the hauntings of Salem. So I was initially interested in this location called Pierce Farm at Witch Hill because of its ties to the Salem witch trials, and that's my specialty. And I was the fact that Mary Eastie, who was one of the three sisters who were accused of witchcraft in 1692, her other sister, Rebecca Nurse, was executed first, and Mary was the second of the three sisters to be executed. So I was more interested in the fact that there were ties to Mary Eastie at that property in Topsfield. And one of the biggest misconceptions with Topsfield is, well, it's not Salem, but back in 1692, that part of Topsfield was considered Salem Village. So there were ties to Salem at that time. So I was more interested in the Mary Eastie backstory and less interested in the Crown and Shield backstory.
All right. And getting into that story, tell me a little bit about, what you know of the activity and history of it.
Well, I get as someone that gives tours pretty much like 2 to 3 times a week in Salem. I talk about it was the murder that rocked Salem in 1830. So it was April 6, 1830, as I see it, as Fake Sam says over and over again on the episode, that Richard Crowninshield, he climbed into the second floor window of Captain Joseph White, and he was hit over the head with a bludgeon, stabbed 13 times around the heart. That's the basics. There's a whole whodunit scenario with that because Richard Crowninshield was a murder for hire. So he was the one that was given money to commit the murder. However, it turns out that the Knapp brothers who paid him to commit the murder had an agenda, and that agenda was to basically get Captain Joseph White's inheritance. So this was a murder for hire. Richard Crowninshield, when this was incorrectly said in the episode, he actually committed suicide in prison. However, what I got when I was telling the story that Halloween, it was actually the night before Halloween when I was telling the story, I started channeling him. And that channeling session, which I didn't know I had that ability to actually channel, I was getting information from him. And he was saying things like, I actually didn't commit the murder alone. I was with my brother. So he actually was kind of pointing to his brother as an accomplice. And he was telling me things that I was kind of getting intrigued by. And that's when he kind of took over my body. So the way it was played out, the episode is actually very, very accurate, but I did not give it permission to take over my body.
Really? So this entity just took it upon itself to enter you and or connect with your energy and make its presence known. How rare is that? I thought you had to get permission in order for that to take place.
Well, let me put it this way. So I was telling the story and I was playing him. I wasn't like connecting to him. I was actually playing him as a character. So while I was playing him as a character, I started channeling him, and then I was getting information from him while I was telling the story. And then while it was going on, so the way it's presented, it was a little less dramatic. The way when I gave permission, like I give permission to Richard Crowninshield to take over my body, which is not what I did. What I did was I did start to channel him, and I was getting information. So I mean, permission, like I didn't give like outwards permission for him to take over my body. I didn't say like, spirit, come inside me, take over. I did not do that.
Okay.
But I did channel him, and that's and that's the beginning of this horrifying incident that left a scar on my life.
Now, in channeling, is that something that had ever happened to you before?
No, I mean that's one of the things that was so surprising about it. 'Cause to be bluntly honest with you, I didn't know what I was doing. I was channeling while this was going on. So I was he was giving me information, but I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool because I'm actually connecting with the spirit. So I thought I was just communing with the spirit and not necessarily, letting him give him permission to take over my body. So I was getting images. What it really started because there was a walking stick, and they did bring this up in the episode where I took the walking stick and I kind of had this psychic moment where I flashed back to the 1800s, and I'm like, there's something to this, and that was kind of the beginning of me connecting psychically with this entity that ends up ultimately taking over my body.
And in getting the information, can you explain it to me? How did it feel? I mean, how did the download of information come to you?
It was just like you said, it was like a download. I was actually seeing images of like flashing in my head when I was connecting with this entity. So I was getting images like when I held the stick and I hit it 3 times on the floor, that's actually when I started having images of him with his brother. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute, he didn't act alone. And I was getting things like he didn't commit suicide. He actually was killed instead of committing suicide and things like that. So it was like visual images and it kind of in my mind's eye when I was seeing it.
Would it play out almost like a movie to you, the way that you were seeing these images play, or was it like you were looking through the eyes of one of them, watching this actually play out?
It started like a very fast movie, kind of like going and like someone hitting the fast forward button, and I was watching it go really fast, and then it started kind of getting dark really fast. So it started getting to the point where I was actually seeing the crowd as he would see people. And he was, there was a part where I say, and this actually did happen to my friend Mike, that they're laughing at me. I felt like the people in the room were like judging me, almost like in a trial. Like I was Richard Crowninshield, and they were judging me based on the heinous crimes that I committed, kind of thing. So I was looking at them through using his eyes.
And then you were empathetically connecting with his emotions at that time?
Yeah, and that's the part I didn't expect, because he's a cold-blooded murderer. So I was actually starting to empathetically feel like, hey, maybe he was framed, or maybe he wasn't that bad of a guy. So that's the initial interaction that I had with him. And the truth is, how did he end up there? He could have attached to me before, and because I give tours at that location where the actual murder took place, maybe he already attached to me and he just jumped into me then while that was happening. I don't really know the logistics of it. I do know that there was a shadow figure, and this is reported not only by Mike, the guy that was doing the sound effects, but also the people in the room. They're like, there was a shadow kind of pacing behind you back and forth while you were talking. And then they said that the shadow actually jumped inside me. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me that? I'm like, when Mike told me that, I'm like, what? Like, there's no way. And so it just basically was a shadow figure kind of walking behind me, and then it kind of jumped into me.
And was there a physical sense to that?
Except for I was getting the information. And this is actually accurate in the episode. When I look in the mirror, my face looked distorted. So I was like, what the hell is going on? I thought maybe I was tired. I wasn't really sure, but my teeth were jagged, and I had kind of like a distorted face. And I thought maybe I was just super tired at this point. And what I was seeing in the mirror was not normal, what I was seeing. So I didn't even think of the possibility of an entity taking over my body. I thought maybe it was just me being super tired. I wasn't really sure what was going on.
And yeah, that's got to feel kind of alarming to realize that you're not completely in control of who you are, and that something has that kind of pull and power over you.
Well, that's the thing that was so terrifying about this incident, is because I didn't have control. And again, when I did this episode, I had a whole month and a half of working on the U.S. of Salem. And to me, the U.S. of Salem was a horror show. I was managing this very haunted attraction. They had a haunting, like a haunted house, and a paranormal experience on it. So I told producers I was going to do the show on that episode specifically. And I'm like, oh, and at the end, I'm at this event at Pierce Farm, and then I get this horrible attachment, kind of like the finale of the show. But the thing is, they turned the finale to that to me was, I was so beat down emotionally at this point. I was so tired after working a month and a half on the U.S. of Salem, that it turned into this 8 days of hell, horrible things happening.
Do you believe that, was it literally trying to push you to end your own life, or were you just picking up on its sadness and what it was feeling, that it wanted to end its own life?
I think the sort of it taking over my body was like, ooh, I have a human host. I can do what I want to do. So I think at first it was kind of like enjoying having a human body to kind of do things. And that includes drinking whiskey. I've been sober for 10 years. At this point, I was sober 7 years. And the idea of drinking alcohol is not, I can't drink alcohol. It's I've been sober, and it's one of the main important things for me. I think as it got more and more scary for me, it it kept saying, do it, do it, do it. And I interpreted that as it wanted me to kill myself.
How hard was it for you to contain that emotion?
It was very hard. I mean, I was going in and out of consciousness as this was progressing. So it started off where I thought I was just tired. I'm just like, let me go to bed. I did the car episode where I opened the car door. I did do that. And when I say I did it, I wasn't in control. So my hand, as I described in the show, that my hand was like doing something else. I'm like, what is going on? And not even thinking that at this point that I was paranormal. I thought maybe I don't know what was going on. I was just like, something weird is going on. I automatically thought it was something related, that it could be paranormal, but it was related to the USO Salem and not this event at Pierce Farm at Witch Hill. I didn't even think about the whole Crown and Shield story that I just told.
Huh.
So, yeah, I mean, I didn't even know. I didn't even think about it. I was like, something's going on. But then I'm like, wait a minute, so that whole period when I was retelling the story, I was getting images from him and connecting to him.
Yeah, the episode is really unnerving to watch as it unwinds and watch you kind of de-evolve. And
yeah, I mean, it went dark really fast. It went from someone who, you know, I'm brought into these events, and I'm brought in these events to tell, usually it's like historical based stories, and I give tours all the time, so it's something that I normally do. But the fact that I was actually playing a character was a little different, because I normally don't actually play murderers. I usually talk about the murderers, but I don't necessarily play them. So kind of taking on that role, I thought that I was tapping into him as a character and not necessarily getting possessed by him.
Did you think you were going crazy?
No, I thought that I was basically just at first really tired, but again, I was going in and out of consciousness. I was like blacking out. And as someone who was an active alcoholic for years, you would have like periods like that when I drank. So it felt kind of like that. I'm like, maybe I'm just really, really sick. Like I'm delirious from the stress that I went. Because I first thought it was getting sick, but then things were happening that were paranormal. And I work in Salem, so I'm surrounded by this.
Why do you think that area is still so rich in activity?
I mean, it's because 1692, 19 innocent people were hanged for witchcraft. One guy was pressed to death. That's going to leave a psychic imprint on the location, which is my theory, and yours too, I'm assuming, that there's, like, when you have an aura of disaster, it's going to open up bad stuff. So there's also modern day witches. There's a lot of conjuring going on there. There's stuff that just, I think it could be also the ley lines that are below. There's a lot of, if you look at the sort of the geodynamics of it, it is a very, there's a lot of stuff in the ground below that could be causing things to stick around as far as like psychic imprints.
I've been to Salem once, and it's a remarkable town, but there is, I hate to use the term because it sounds flippant, but there's kind of a magic to the area. It just feels different.
And yeah, I mean, the people come there. When I first started visiting, first of all, I didn't want to write my third book, Goes to Salem, which becomes kind of like, that's the book everyone knows me for. And I didn't want to write it because I thought it was like kind of like a tourist trap. And I'm like, they're actually kind of demonizing, or not demonizing, they're kind of making light of this horrible thing that happened in 1692. But then as I spent more time there, sort of working there, I realized that, there's actually something to it. And that began kind of like my beginnings of like really diving into the history of Salem and realizing that it is very haunted. And why is it haunted? Like I'm still figuring that out.
We're going to take a break. We'll come back. We'll continue talking. And if you have questions for our guest, you can give us a call as well. Phone lines are open for the remainder of the show. 480-571-3540 is the number. 480-571-3540. Or you can email me your questions to dave@midnightinthedesert.com. Or for you subscribers, hit me up through the wormhole. We'll be back. I'm Dave Schrader. This is Midnight in the Desert. Welcome back. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Along with me, Sam Baltrusis, this evening as we talk about provoking evil, his cautionary tale. Your story is really terrifying, and the fact that you had such a dramatic change in your life and in your personality. How did it impact the people in and around you in your personal life?
Well, I mean, first of all, I just want to stress I did not choose that title, provoking evil. In fact, right. The whole accidentally provoking evil probably would have been more me if people know me. So the people that know me, I'm kind of like a nutty professor. I mean, I'm basically just absent-minded. I'm a sweet guy, and people actually know me. So when this was going on, the people in my life, what I was trying to do is I was trying to protect them. So there's a whole point throughout this going on, where it was going on, or the infestation was going on, that my friend Mike, Mike, hide the knives, hide the weapons, because this is bad. So I felt like that part of the dark thoughts, it was more me hurting myself as opposed to me hurting somebody else. But they, of course, as you know, I mean, you've been on these recreation shows too. They have a tendency of kind of making it a little bit more dramatic than what they really are. But I mean, I wanted to ask you, because you were on Haunted Hospitals, did you feel like they did an accurate representation of your experience?
No, not at all. I mean, they gave accurate respect to parts of the story. What didn't make sense to me, in all honesty, was the things that they changed, the lies that they, and I can't even say lies, but it was just Dave Schrader in 2006, Dave Schrader went into the hospital in upstate New York. No, I didn't. It was in Minnesota, and it was in 2012.
So to me, completely changed.
Right. So to me, it was an inconsequential part of the story. So why change that? Then it was back in 2001, he visited a famous hospital, and they tell my encounter at Waverly Hills, and I didn't go in 2001. I went in 2007, and again, an inconsequential point where it's why change the date? Why not just get the right information? And then my interaction was, I guess, not exciting enough for them, because I saw this thing, the shadow person walk through me and down the hall, and I turned around, freaked out by what I'd just seen, but I didn't have any sense. And I think they had me drop to the floor screaming in the video. Then when I was in the hospital story itself, what was funny, the Canadian version, Bart L. From the LGAB chat had actually videotaped it and sent just the clip to me that I thought was very funny regarding the contradictory sense that they had shared. They have the scene where I'm legitimately telling the story, and I said, I wasn't afraid, but I was definitely unnerved. And then they cut to the scene of me in the bed, and I'm screaming and I'm flipping and flopping. So they couldn't even get the right story right that they were portraying. They have me saying I wasn't afraid, and then they go directly into this goofball screaming and yelling and flipping around. Now they contacted me after and said, well, what'd you think of it? And I said, well, I only saw a clip of it, and in the one clip I saw, you got it wrong. You show that even in the videotape I'm okay, and then you show me freaking out. And so they removed it for the American version, and then they made Tim, my co-host, the 6'4" black guy. So it was just, it's funny things like that. It's why couldn't you get any of these little bits right? But the story generally was right. I saw these things in my room, and they interacted with me, and they were frightening to see and unnerving, and it really did impact me and bother me quite a bit, because I felt like I was almost letting them down, like there was nothing I could do to help them.
And that's exactly it. And so I will say this, they actually did, they as in the producers of A Haunting, did a fantastic job. I'm actually surprised how good it is, because I've been on other recreation shows where they would recreate my episode and they would completely change the history, which happened on the Travel Channel. So I was actually surprised because I spend so much time talking to the producer. She would just call me and she's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And she's like, "That time that, where you were telling the story of Richard Crowninshield, like, did you hold the stick?" And like, really, we spent months talking about the story. So she picked up things that I didn't even remember saying. I would just kind of say, "Oh, and there was this time where that kind of thing." So I'm actually really impressed with The Haunting, with the accuracy of the story. But as you and I both know, that the narrative, if it doesn't fit into the narrative, they'll change things to make it, I guess, more like made for TV kind of scenario. And I've been in situations where they changed history. And the one thing that I have regrets on this episode of A Haunting is them saying that Richard Crowninshield actually was hanged, and Fake Sam says that at the very end. I'm like, he was not hanged. He committed suicide. And to me, that makes more sense with the story because I was suicidal. And
right.
And the fact that they got the history incorrect, that kind of made Fake Sam look stupid. But with that said, I mean, they did a really, really good job with the accuracy of this. Now, were some moments over dramatized? Absolutely, especially when Fake Sam was like, "The spirits come inside me," and I never said that. I said it, I was interacting with him, but it was not that dramatic, and it wasn't like I didn't provoke evil. That is not my style. People that know me know that I'm not like that at all.
Likely story, Sam. Likely story. TV doesn't lie. We know that.
Yeah, it's totally true.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. And it's not always the network, unfortunately. They just purchase these shows. They don't deal with the content that the producers put into it. So that's where it gets a little bit dodgy on these.
The part that I'm actually really grateful about is that they did not make it a demonic case, because that happens. You see that over and over again, and it was definitely an entity attachment manifestation. And calling it possession probably is extreme. I would say entity manipulation with the situation, but it was bad. It was really, really bad, and it got worse as time progressed. And I didn't know it was more powerful than other experiences I had in my past, because I go to the most haunted locations, and so do you. And we deal with this stuff on a regular basis, and sometimes you come across stuff that's not so good. That happened with me in this situation, and I didn't know how to handle it, and I needed help. And my friend Joni, who's a fellow author, she's like, "Something's wrong with Sam," kind of thing. And because I think I posted something about a skeleton on my Facebook, on my social media, and she actually reached out to Michael Robichaud, the shaman. He immediately, he reached out to me quickly, really fast. So that did happen, and I didn't even at this point even think it was I just thought it was, you asked did I think it was going crazy? I just thought I was really, really sick, and I needed to sleep, but I couldn't sleep because it was so bad. I was going in and out of consciousness.
All right. Now, dealing with this, when you get the shaman in to help, how did that play out for you? I mean, was that something that did bring you immediate relief?
Well, the way it worked is he reached out to me pretty immediately, and I said in the show that it was him from above, because and actually I was talking to Joni tonight. She's like, "Sam, do you remember?" Because we did talk, and because I don't even remember asking her for help. I think she intuitively knew something was wrong. I don't even remember going, "Joni, help me," whatever the Fake Sam says to Fake Joni. But I do remember that Michael Robichaud said, he kind of gave me the lowdown, "Hey, this is what's going to happen." And I'm like, okay, not even knowing what a shaman really did. And when the cleansing ceremony was going on, I saw my grandmother, so I saw and I think that it's not normal for people that go through the cleansing ceremony to actually see the spirits. I did, and I saw there was a Native American spirit, there was a woman spirit, and there was my grandmother. And my grandmother was very devout Catholic, and she, I guess, was activated, and she was fighting the entity that came out of me. And I saw this go down, and then I passed out, and then I woke up, and I felt complete relief. So they cut the part about the grandmother because when I told it in the when I was telling my story on camera, I started crying uncontrollably seeing my grandmother because I didn't even, I remember seeing her, but I remember like her showing me how to do the rosary because I was Catholic and then my parents divorced, and she was like doing the rosary, like showing me how to do the rosary, and she appeared to me while this was going on, and it kind of brought it back because I'm like, oh, wait a minute, my grandmother was there, and and when I remembered that part, it made me like sob uncontrollably, because the fact that my grandmother was there fighting for me at this point. So some things were cut, and that was cut from it, and I feel I'm glad they cut it because I was sobbing like a little baby when I was talking about my grandmother.
Now, seeing the spirits, did you actually see it when it was ejected from you, as it portrays in the episode? And could you feel it? Was there a sense of something leaving you?
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, it was, as Michael Robichaud, the shaman, said, there was a battle going on, and I knew that I was about to go to battle, and like my grandmother was there to fight with me, kind of like you gotta fight, Sam, you gotta fight, kind of thing. And instead of fighting, I literally sat up. I saw him kind of come out of me, and then I didn't see the wrestling part. Which when I saw that on the show, I was crying. I cried, to be honest. When I saw the whole show, I was sobbing throughout the whole show, like watching it playback, because some things I kind of forgot, and seeing it kind of see your life, like seeing a part of your life that was so dark and that you were so embarrassed by, play out on national television was a whole other experience. I was sobbing when I saw that part, because that I did tell the producer that, and apparently Michael, the shaman, told them that too. So it was his talking to the producers coupled with my talking with the producers, and they were able to kind of come up with that scenario. But I saw it physically leave me. I literally passed out. Like I heard my ears ring, like a ringing noise in my ears, and then I passed out, and then I woke. I don't know how long I was passed out, but I was passed out.
And once you come to, after having something that heavy attached to you for so long, what was that like?
I felt like it lifted from me. I felt like I got my life back. It's like a cloud that you're kind of surrounded by a cloud, and the cloud leaves. It's just like, and the cloud was a really, really bad thunderstorm that was like making your life horrible. And so that it was, when it happened, I remember kind of describing the idea of being like having the attachment as something that like it's like you're really, really sick and that you don't want to go to the doctor, kind of thing. And I do that with actual physical ailments. Like if I have like I stubbed my toe, or something, I probably need to go to a doctor to have it checked out. I'm the type of person, like, I'll take care of it. That's what I did with this, but it was a spiritual element, and it wasn't a physical ailment. And so I kind of treated it like how I treat my health sometimes. And it was just, it got really bad. But the fact that I didn't even think that this was a spiritual thing. I knew it could be paranormal. I mean, the things that were happening were definitely paranormal. But the idea that like a shaman could actually do this, I didn't even know the shamans do that. Like I didn't know that that's what shamans do. I didn't have that experience before, and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful that he came to my rescue. But yeah, like I remember, like people actually, because I'm getting messages from all over the world who are watching this episode. So this has had a major impact on a lot of people, and both good and bad. Some snide remarks, but generally it's been very supportive. Like yes, me too, or other things that they say that they've experienced, that they're like, you're really brave to tell your story. And I was really brave, because like that was, as someone that's a paranormal, expert, or someone that writes about the paranormal, I should have known better. I should have protected myself. I should have done stuff, but I really wasn't as well versed as I thought I was, because I didn't know what was going on.
And when he pushed this out and you were cleared of this finally. Were there ever any tendrils that you felt that were still somewhat attached?
Yeah, that's a good question, because actually Michael Robichaud, the shaman, asked me if I wanted to bind and banish him, and I just said to banish him. I didn't want to hurt him, and I had this like I didn't want to let it go kind of thing, and that could be him kind of investing in me because he didn't want to leave. But with my grandmother coming, in hindsight, I wanted to hold on to whatever that was, that attachment, because for whatever reason, looking back on it, was horrible what was going on. But while it was happening, I was getting information. It's hard to explain, but it was definitely something like I was there, but he was in control of my body. So I was in the back, and that me being in the back of my mind was like it became a prison, and he was kind of running the show. So the fact that I even asked for help is surprising. I don't even remember asking for help, to be honest with you, with Joni. So that part, it almost like it happened it was like an intervention almost. I didn't want to let it go.
That's strange. Do you think that it was your feelings, your emotional addiction, without it being an addiction, but I mean, was it like an emotional addiction to this sense that your body just didn't know how to deal with?
I think that someone that's been in recovery for as many years as I've been in recovery, I think that the people that are recovering alcoholics, which I just drank beer when I was drinking, I think that we kind of we thrive in chaos. Like that's kind of like a natural thing for us. So I do think it's tied to my addictive personality. And as you saw in the show, like the character drinks coffee, like every scene is like the fake Sam is drinking coffee. So I drink a lot of coffee sober. But I did that when I was drinking. I would drink alcohol instead. So I think that maybe like Sam, the real Sam, and not the entity that took over Sam, may have kind of thrived in the chaos of it. And was really intrigued by what was going on, but not really knowing what was going on, kind of thing. I didn't realize it was as dark as it really was while it was happening until after I came out of it, and then like, oh my gosh, that was horrible, like what just happened. But I didn't see that at first.
Did I guess in then ridding yourself of this, did it leave you vulnerable? Was there a chink in the armor now where other spirits and entities could effectively connect with you, or did you just immediately go into complete protection mode going forward?
Well, what happened from that, so my spirit guide was activated. So when I say that, was my grandmother was activated, and then I started educating myself on that part of it. The fact that I was able to channel, now I know that I have that ability to connect psychically with spirits. Because before it would be pretty much like me talking to other people like you or other. I'll be honest with you, like when I used to if I interviewed like a clairvoyant or a psychic, I would totally, like, I thought it was hocus pocus. I thought it was totally made up stuff. And even though I knew I was sensitive, I just didn't, the idea of like channeling just wasn't in my vocabulary, And so I started off as a skeptic who had, of course, believed to a certain degree, but I wanted people to kind of prove it to me, kind of thing, to the point where now I'm a full-blown believer. So now that I've gone through this episode, I identify as a clairvoyant. So I think it kind of opened up my third eye. It opened up my spirit guides. The fact that I had this spiritual experience with Michael Robichaud, it opened up a floodgate of clairvoyance, really. And when I say clairvoyance, it's like Lorraine Warren, Amy Allen clairvoyance. It's like I'm confident I can go in a location and pick up on a location like that now. Before I couldn't.
All right. Is that kind of a curse now that you're that wide open and aware of these situations?
It's a blessing and a curse. I mean, I definitely think that, of all people, I'm like, I'm in my 40s. I'm an author. Like, the last thing I want is to be a clairvoyant. Like, that's not Like, I didn't think that would be in my cards. I thought I would be like this kind of skeptic, writer, historian my whole life. And the idea that I see dead people or communicate with dead people is kind of freaky. So I think that it's a gift, but it's a curse. And the fact that now I know I'm more susceptible to attachments. I know why I was so scared before, because I used to be terrified of spirits or any kind of encounter or anything like that's normal to me now. But back then, when I was younger, or even as a young adult, I was mortified of possession. Like, that was I say this on the episode of A Haunting, that was my greatest fear. Like, being possessed, like watching The Exorcist as a child was my greatest fear of all time. And the fact that it happened to me and I survived it, like that makes me a stronger person. I mean, like I could never, if you said, Sam, you're going to get, have an entity attach itself to you and take over your body, I'm like, that's crazy. And now I'm like, I believe it. So now that I can do this and I know that I have that ability, I have to be careful. So I do protect myself. I have had another attachment after that, but I knew what was going on. I was able to take care of it quicker than I did the first time.
Well, how did you get a second attachment?
I mean, I work in Salem, so I work in an area that's extremely active. Apparently, I picked up I was working on my book Wicked Salem, and I picked up like an old crone type attachment that I banished on Halloween in Salem. so it was like, I know that sounds like a stereotype, but I literally told this woman who kind of latched on to me that I'm not the one. I think she thought that she was going to be my spirit guide, and so she was kind of latching on to me, and you can hear her cackle. So that happened within 3 days. I was able to do like a banishing ritual myself with a fellow clairvoyant, and we did a banishing ritual in Salem, which is so stereotypical, but we did.
Right. It happened to be a crone.
Right. When I say crone, she was like a cackling old woman, like, right. And I'm like, you're such a stereotype. I'm like, come on. And she would laugh at that. But yeah, it was. I mean, do I think that it was related to the Salem witch trials? I don't know. I just know that I picked something up, and it could have been something that's related to. Because there's a lot of. I mean, I interviewed Lori Cabot, who's the official witch of Salem for the book, and it could be related to that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure how I picked it up, but I just know I picked it up.
Is it that easy to get an attachment?
It is when you're a clairvoyant. It is when you're sensitive to the paranormal. It is if you're a beacon of light to the spirit world. Absolutely.
So if people are just walking through haunted locations and cemeteries, I know that's a big fear for many people. But if you're not necessarily truly open to it, you don't think that there's any fear in it connecting that way?
As I always say this, and it always gets cut from the TV shows that I'm on. Like, I don't hunt ghosts; ghosts hunt me. Like, it's like it's a sort of like, I don't think that. No offense, Dave. I don't think that because you don't have it. I mean, no offense, or maybe you do. You did have experiences in the hospital, but I think that some people just have it and some people don't, and it's like a muscle that you work. And the fact that I got taken over by an entity that opened up my intuition, and to the point where I'm clairvoyant, and I actually communicate with the dead people. So it's like a muscle that you work. It's like a frequency that you tune into, and some people have it, and some people don't. I mean, someone that has worked in the paranormal field, and I hate to say this, but usually it's more women, and some guys are more sensitive too. For me personally, I'm surprised that I have the gift. I would not, if I picked, like, I had a lineup of people like, hey, he's the one that's going to be clairvoyant, I would have not picked me. I would have picked somebody else. But I am. It's just something that I have.
Steve Baltrusis, our guest this evening. We do have a couple questions coming in from the wormhole, and you can email me, dave@midnightinthedesert.com, if you have questions for either one of us regarding hauntings, spiritual attachments, possession, oppression, any of those aspects you'd like to chime in with, or have your own story from Salem or that surrounding area. We'd love to hear from you. 480-571-3373.
480-571-3540 is the number. That's 480-571-3540. We only have 1 hour left together, so if you want to get in a call, if you have questions, this is the time to do it. You can also hit me up. If you are a subscriber, just hit us up through the wormhole. That's just one of the cool advantages of being a subscriber. $5 a month gets you access to all of our live episodes and all of the episodes directly after they air live. So you'll never have to miss another minute. If you can't stay up late, no problem. You don't have to miss anything. You can tune in tomorrow, listen to the show in its entirety, and you get access to every episode since episode 1 with Art Bell all the way through tonight. You'll be able to do that for just $5 a month. You're not going to get that kind of entertainment for only $5 a month anywhere else. So go subscribe right now at midnightinthedesert.com. We're back. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Sam Baltrusis, our guest this evening. Sam is the author of Wicked Salem and the upcoming Ghost Writers, which is slotted for October 2019. Again, he's penned 11 historical-based ghost books, and he's been featured on several national TV shows on many different channels. He's here with us this evening talking about his experience and some of the experiences he's covered in his books and history. Again, if you have questions, you can call us, 480-571-3540. That's 480-571-3540. Or you can email me, Dave at midnightinthedesert.com, or hit me up through the wormhole, just like Wisteria Whisper did. Hi, Dave. My niece, a deacon in a church, saw red eyes on people in daylight in a crowded place. She said this has happened to her several times in public. She got away from these things no one else could see but her. Were these evil spirits trying to get into her? Well, you know, and I don't know where you stand on this, Sam. I mean, I'm reticent to jump to demonic, but people that are involved in the church that have high positions sometimes are called to those positions and have a gift called discernment. And it very well could be that she is seeing people that have afflictions of paranormal activity, demonic possession, maybe, as we heard Sam's story, spiritual possession, and that may be what's alerting. Not that the eyes are necessarily actually glowing, but it's the aura that the soul is giving off that she's able to read and see. And Sam, I don't know where you stand on those concepts, but, you know, that would make some sense to me.
Well, I as someone who, you know, because having done what I've done or been to where I've been, for example, in Salem, there is a figure that I've been kind of confronting and dealing with, and this is other people have spotted it too. It's like a shadow figure, but the shadow figure has red eyes, and it's got a hat, so potentially it's a hat man scenario. So I would probably think that, you know, like I would kind of ask, like, with the red eyes. I'm just curious, like the backstory to that with that story. But for me, my personal experience with red eyes was with a hat man figure in Salem.
All right, now for listeners that are not familiar with the hat man phenomena, why don't you clue them in?
Well, you know, it's weird. I didn't even know about it before until like people were reporting it. So the hat man is the idea of usually it's at a location where there has been you know, like kind of like a soul collector. That's what some people say. So soul collector where there's been a lot of death. So why would it be the hat man be in Salem? Perhaps because it was the area where the witch trials, maybe because of the other deaths that happened in the area, or maybe it's just a shadow figure that happens to have red eyes. I'm not sure. I'm not in the school that all shadow figures are bad. I think some shadow figures are just not able to manifest fully. So I'm not going to quickly say it's demonic because it has red eyes. But I will say that I'm I'm open-minded when it comes to Hat Man or other entities with the idea of interdimensional, that maybe they can move from different dimensions. But I just know what I saw. I saw a shadow figure. Multiple people have reported seeing it. It also could be a manifestation of something else, like not actually the Hat Man. It may be just a spirit that's wearing a hat. But the Hat Man's been reported all over the world. People call it different things, the man with the hat, or they'll give it different names. But usually, it's a harbinger of death.
Well, that's cheery. Yeah, and many people I know that. Right. Heidi, oh gosh, her name is jumping out of my head. Heidi.
Yeah, she wrote a book on it. Yeah.
She's written numerous books on shadow people and the
Hatman phenomena. And it's, the Hatman seems to be quite disturbing. And, I know you said you're not quick to jump to the demonic realm when it comes to these entities with red eyes. That always does seem to be kind of a prelude to something bad. You don't usually hear stories where, the good things appear with red eyes. I've talked to people for years regarding their experiences, and I'm always unnerved by the people that have had shadow people encounters in their own room. And then I ask, how many of you believe it's evil? And some people will raise their hands, and I'll ask why. And in some instances, they'll say because it's black and it's dark and it's frightening looking. And I've mentioned, well, once you get past that initial shock and awe of seeing it, what do you do next? And they're like, oh, usually I fall asleep. And I said, so if it was something truly evil, would you fall asleep? Or don't you think the fight or flight would kick in and you would run, try to get the hell out of there? So I'm guessing these things are probably more natural in presence than we know. That's why we're not so terrified of them. We might get shocked and titillated by them for a brief moment, but we seem to fall right back asleep when it comes to that. But the characters with the red eyes leave people much more unnerved. And those always seem to come with more of a menacing atmosphere or aftermath.
Right. I mean, so as someone that's also a paranormal researcher, when someone says, hey, I saw a shadow figure in my room when I was in my bed, I would say, maybe you were dreaming. And seriously, it could be that state you get into. So, I mean, I would question it if someone saw a shadow figure while they were half asleep in their bed. I've seen things too in that state. But yeah, with me, I've seen it all, Dave. So I'm not I don't automatically think it's demonic when I see red eyes, and it's not good, but I don't automatically think demonic because I think that the cases, they're usually entities. I'm in the school of elemental, so I do think that a lot of, especially in Salem, that it's stuff that predates the Puritans. It's stuff that's there from before. So elementals, which I'm kind of getting into. I think some of the encounters that I've had are elementals, and I'm kind of in the school with this thing that we're experiencing in Salem to be potentially an elemental or something that was conjured.
Well, that's what I wonder. How many people come there that are weekend witches, that are not real people involved in the craft, that are doing things to elicit paranormal activity, and it's, more of a hobby than a way of life. And what kind of rift or issue are they causing doing this?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. I mean, you visited one day. I'm there pretty much every day during the week working, and you see people are novices. They come to Salem to get scared, and so they bring their baggage with them, and sometimes they conjure their stuff here. So yeah, the weekend witches, we have hundreds of them coming into Salem. Some of my friends who are witches or practicing witches are legit, and they realize if they do something like that, that'll come back to them. But there are other people that think it's cool because they saw it on The Craft, or think they want to be like the witches in Hocus Pocus, and they'll try to do. Who knows what they do? But yeah, I've seen it happen. I strongly feel like that thing that people are spotting, that shadow figure, is something that's been conjured.
So you think it's not something natural or a shade presence? And I mention that because I think, there's the old saying of he's a shadow of the man he once was. I think there's something to that. Sometimes I think that might be all that's left to manifest of these images, of these beings that were once human. It's the darkest, last remnant echo of visual kind of sighting that it's capable of actually presenting.
Well, absolutely, but also it could be feeding off people's energy too. So it's manifesting. Maybe the red eyes come from other people's energy, and that's the thing with me. I have to be careful because I have, as we saw with the Richard Crowninshield entity infestation, I get attacked or attachments from energy vampires from entities. So yeah, I mean, maybe I really feel like that, and I talked about this before. It could be a thought form as well. I mean, people come to Salem to be scared, so maybe this entity is a manifestation of all the ghost tours, all the the candles being lit to conjure spirits. There's all sorts of things that happen in Salem that doesn't happen anywhere else in the country. Salem is this like weird mecca of people wanting to play out their weekend witch fantasies.
What is one of the most widely experienced paranormal happenings in Salem? And I mean that in two ways. What is one of the most, this story always happens, so many people have seen it, but what else has happened where multiple people have seen the same phenomena at the same time? Do you have a couple of stories like that you could share?
Yeah, so the one that my first encounter in Salem was a lady. There was a lady in white. And there's always a lady in white, right? But there was a lady in white that appeared in the cemetery. It's Old Burying Point, or the Charter Street Cemetery. It's known by two different names. And when I experienced this lady in white, it was, but even before the infestation. So I did have ghostly encounters back in the day, back when I first started giving tours. But it looked like a ball of light. The ball like got bigger and bigger, and then took the shape of a woman. And then the woman kind of was coming at me. In the show that I talked about this experience, they reenacted it, and apparently I was terrified. And I was drinking my coffee, and I dropped the coffee, and I ran. But truthfully, I was like, what is going on? What is that? And the lady in white's been spotted by multiple people, and she usually comes from the same spot of the cemetery. And it turns out that it's actually a grave of Mary Corey. And Mary Corey was the second wife to Giles Corey. And so yeah, when I give my tours, I actually use my dowsing rods, and I communicate with Mary Corey. She has been spotted many times, but I think she just wanted her story to be told. But so that's one story in Salem. There's also Bridget Bishop. She's one of the witch trials victims. Supposedly, she sticks around seeking post-mortem justice. My experience with Bridget Bishop was when I first started giving tours, I was basically saying that this is where Bridget Bishop's tavern was, and Bridget Bishop was the first to be executed in Salem during the witch trials, and the only one to be executed by herself. But the truth is, she didn't own a tavern, and she's often confused with another bishop, Sarah Bishop, who was a tavern owner. So I was saying the story to a group of people right outside of the Lyceum, which is Turner Seafood, and an apple rolled from a corner and hit my foot. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Like, this is I thought maybe one of the other tour guides was playing a trick on me or something. I looked around the corner and there was nobody there. So everyone saw the apple kind of come from nowhere, and they thought it was part of the tour. Like, I was able to make an apple roll up to me. But truthfully, that was her apple orchard. So the fact that the apple kind of rolled up to me, in my opinion, it was Bridget Bishop correcting what I was saying. And you'll find that the spirits in Salem are very playful, and they'll do things like that, like rolling an apple up to you, or manifesting in the middle of the cemetery. And how stereotypical is that? It's like a lady in white in the cemetery in Salem. Hello, but she's been spotted by multiple people.
Are there other let me start off with this: dark manifestations, evil, demonic, or do they not really exist in that area because it is such a high concentration of witches, witchcraft, and people that are there in a more protective way, doing protective summonings? Well,
that's a good point, because I do think that my Wiccan, if I have an entity, I'll reach out to my Wiccan friends, my witch friends. Because witches scare off entities. So in fact, like when I did the banishing ritual with the crone, I actually used the Wiccan banishing ceremony to get rid of it. And I find that actually Wiccan rituals actually work when it comes to doing when it comes to banishing. But I also, of course, I reach out to Michael Robichaud, the shaman, as well. I'm probably more of a shaman than I am a witch, but I do use ritual for protection. So that's a good point, absolutely. But there is something that's in Salem that to me is non-human, and that's probably more of an elemental in nature as opposed to demonic.
All right. Now, the spirits that people are coming into contact with, again, because there's been such a rich history of activity, invocation, and intention, do you think that they're truly contacting the dead, or are we just sending transmissions through time to one another?
That's a very good theory. I don't know what it is, and that's when you asked me in the top of the show or top of our interview, what I think a ghost is. I'm not really sure sometimes. And when I'm communicating with Mary out in the field with my dowsing rods, I mean, really, if you look at dowsing rods, you're doing it. Like as the person holding the dowsing rods is controlling it. Am I moving it? No, it's moving on its own, but my mind is kind of making the dowsing rods go back and forth. I think that, like, say when you're doing a Ouija board spirit board, you can't see the O word, but yeah, when you're doing a spirit board or you're doing other forms of clairvoyance or spirit communication, I don't know what I'm talking to sometimes, and that's scary. Like not knowing, is it a interdimensional being? Is it something that's an elemental? I'm not really sure, but I know what I've seen. I know what I've experienced. And I personally think that a lot of it is residual energy that I'm experiencing.
Are there other type of phenomena that are seen in Salem? And we always hear of the ghost phenomena, but do you guys have a UFO element, an alien element, any kind of strange cryptids or anything like that as well?
Yeah, I mean, Salem Harbor, there was definitely reports of UFO experiences, especially throughout the 1950s. I tend to stay away from aliens or from UFO encounters, even though I have friends who are into ufology. But I do think that was, a lot of the manifestations, like for example, cryptids. There's really nowhere to have a cryptid. I know puckwudgies are definitely popular throughout Massachusetts, and I have talked to many people who allegedly experienced seeing a puckwudgie. But in Salem, it's definitely more, I would say, more shadow figures and more what we would call elemental nature. So it's like a very protective spirit, but neither good nor bad. And it's in essence from God. It predates the Puritans, but I do think that some of the activity, if you really look at the Salem witch trials, there was a lot of paranormal stuff that was reported and used as evidence during the Salem witch trials, and spectral evidence, which was made up experiences with doppelgangers and with like ghost pigs and that sort of thing, was used to accuse innocent people of witchcraft.
Now, you have a unique connection with Salem as well. Didn't you find out that you're actually related to one of the infamous families there?
Yeah. So this is, okay, while I'm writing my books, I've written 11 books, and 2 of them are in Salem, and I spend many days in Salem. I definitely don't live in Salem because once I spend too much time there, I feel drained by spending too much time. But I work there. So my mother does Ancestry.com, and my mother's Southern, and she's like, Sam, I've been doing Ancestry.com, and guess what? And I'm like, what? She's like, I think we may have burned some witches. I'm like, Mom, we didn't. Mom, there were hangs. First of all, they weren't burned, and that's one of my biggest misconceptions that people think. And she's like, she started getting upset because the idea of like maybe we had a hand in that, our family did, made her really emotional. And I'm like, wait a minute, Mom, what's the name? And she's like, she's pointing to the lineage. So basically the family tie to the Putnam family, as it turns out. We are related to the Gould family. So the Goulds came over from England. They settled in Newport. We knew that we were from Portsmouth, as my mother says, Portsmouth, but it's Portsmouth. So that our family settled in Portsmouth, but there's a branch of our family that settled in Topsfield, which is where I got the manifestation or the infestation, which I kind of find ironic or weird. So anyway, it turns out that our great 10 times removed great aunts, Priscilla Gould Putnam, was the matriarch of the Putnam family, and the Putnam family were the major accusers in the Salem witch trials. And I found this out about a month and a half ago.
That's pretty exciting, right? Then there's a reason for why you feel the way you feel and why you're so drawn to that area. You're actually kind of a bloodline to it.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you. Like, I have people on my tours like, oh, I'm related to Rebecca Nurse. Like everyone from all around the world has a tie to the witch trials. So I don't think it gives you magic powers, which I think that a lot of people do. I think if they're related to an innocent person that was hanged for witchcraft, it gives them some kind of special magical, abilities. For me, it actually explains everything for me because I've been passionate about the history of the Salem witch trials. I studied when I was in college. I studied the Holocaust, and so I was obsessed with the horrors that unfolded in Nazi Germany. And my professor Elie Wiesel was like, he wrote Night. He's like, focus on the Salem witch trials. And then I was like, why? And it's like, because history repeats itself, and this is a prime example of what happens when there's mass hysteria. So I switched kind of my gears from the Holocaust, studying the Holocaust, to studying the Salem witch trials, and not even tying the paranormal to it. I didn't really write about ghosts until about 11 years ago, the paranormal, about 11 years ago. But the history has always intrigued me, and now I know why. And I'm very passionate about giving a voice to the victims. And now I know, because I probably internally feel guilty because my family were major accusers.
Nicely done. See how you are. That's always cool when you can find connections to that aspect of who you are, where you came from. You've got the book Ghostwriters, focusing on ghosts associated with each author. And I'd like to cover that when we come back, if you wouldn't mind, from our next segment and really kind of delve into that. But going Absolutely. Out, we have about 3 minutes left together. What are some of the most terrifying experiences that have been related to you from that area?
You mean related to the Putnam family?
No, just period. What are some of the more terrifying paranormal experiences that people have reported to you from having happened in and around Salem?
Well, again, when people report like paranormal encounters in Salem, I take it with a grain of salt because it's sort of like people go to Salem to expect to have a paranormal experience. But I will say, as someone who spends more than one day in Salem and spends many days in Salem, getting to know what's going on there. There's a darkness bubbling beneath the surface. So when people, to be honest with you, if you want to have a paranormal experience in Salem, go off season. That's where I've had all my experiences have been in November, after October. It's never been in October when there's thousands of people there. So I would say, probably the scariest would be the shadow figure that I was talking about earlier. That happened off season. I was working at a hotel on Essex Street overnight, and I came out. I heard a banging noise, like someone was banging on metal. I looked through the window of the bookstore right next to the hotel, and I saw a man wearing a hat and with red eyes. That was my one experience with the shadow man. However, other people, now that I've had that experience and kind of been public with that experience, other people have reported their experiences as well. So I would say that right now it's the shadow man.
All right, so the shadow man figures would be among the more unnerving. All right,
right.
Go ahead.
But also Giles Corey was pressed to death over a 2, maybe 3 day period. And so Howard Street Cemetery has a lot of paranormal history to it. People ask me where the most haunted cemetery is, and people generally just point to Charter Street or the one that I was talking about earlier. But Howard Street Cemetery actually has the location where Giles Corey was posted at. And so that area, all sorts of things have been reported, but there have been photos of what look like Puritans gathered around in a circle, like that's been captured on camera. Also, people that spot what they say is Giles Corey, something bad will happen to them or happen to Salem. And I thought that was made up legend until I talked to people who actually reported seeing Giles Corey. And my first question to them is, what did Giles Corey look like? And everyone said kind of the same thing. He kind of tattered clothing and an old man. So so Giles Corey apparently kind of like a harbinger of death as well. Like so something bad will happen in Salem if he's spotted.
All right, let's take a break. We'll come back and we'll go into ghostwriters. We'll start hearing some of the fascinating stories behind famous authors and the ghost and reported sightings of their afterlife activity. We'll do that when we return. I'm Dave Schrader. You're listening to Midnight in the Desert. Welcome back to the program. We're wrapping up another edition of Midnight in the Desert, another half an hour left with our guest, Sam Baltrusis. Sam has written a book that will be coming out this October called Ghostwriters, focusing on the ghosts associated with famous authors. What inspired you to jump into a story like this?
Well, I got a deal with Globe Pequot, who optioned for several books, and I started Ghostwriters with just talking to fellow authors and talking to them about their paranormal experiences. So I would interview people like Johnny Mahan or Gare Allen or Richard Estep and talk to them. So it was more not about famous authors. It was it was off contemporary paranormal authors initially, and then that concept turned into focusing on famous authors like Edgar Allan Poe or Edith Wharton or Stephen King. They don't have to be dead necessarily. So it was people that have ghost stories associated with their locations with ghost stories associated with them. So it just I pitched it to Globe Pequot. They loved it, and it started off as a journey of me finding out all these wonderful locations.
All right, well, let's dip into a couple of your favorite stories, and I know the book comes out in October. We'll touch on it now and start getting people excited about what to expect.
Sure. I mean, I think when I first started the book, I talked to a lot of people that are fellow paranormal authors, and one of them was I interviewed John Zaffis, and it was really amazing to talk to him and communicate with him. And so there's a lot of profiles in this book, but I also do a lot of locations. So I went to not The Shining, but the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park, Colorado. That was my first trip there. It was always a dream to go out there and investigate and kind of explore the spirits at the Stanley. So that was I went out to the Stanley. Fortunately, my little brother Justin just moved out to Denver, Colorado, so I was able to stay with him for a couple nights, and then I stayed several nights at the Stanley Hotel, and then I was able to go to Bangor, Maine, and that's where Stephen King. That's where it was inspired. So a lot of it initially started off with the inspiration for these famous authors like Stephen King or Edith Wharton or Edgar Allan Poe, but then it became going to places like Edith Wharton's The Mounts, which is in the Berkshires in Lenox, Massachusetts, and actually reading her ghost stories. So she was a firm believer in ghosts, and she, as you may or may not know, she wrote The Age of Innocence and one of my favorite female writers from that era. And knowing that she was traumatized by a shadow figure her entire life. So she had this figure chasing her, and she would talk about it, and it stemmed from her childhood. She first spotted the shadow figure, and supposedly that shadow figure still lurks in the mountain, Lenox, Massachusetts. So things like that, things I didn't even know. I didn't know Edith Wharton even wrote ghost stories, but by going to the mounts and talking to Robert Oakes, who's the tour guide there, he was able to tell me the whole backstory, and then I was able to read her ghost stories, and it was really interesting. Edgar Allan Poe, everyone wants to know about him, but he, I know this because I actually give tours in Boston in addition to Salem, but he was born in Boston, and there was several locations in Boston with ties to him here. There's also allegedly hauntings in New York City with Edgar Allan Poe. And then, of course, there's him being in Providence as well. So there was some ties to him in Providence.
Now, what about Edgar Allan Poe? I mean, he had a really interesting and bizarre life, and death. I mean, has his spirit been seen much since his death?
Yeah, and it's weird. Like, apparently, he's been spotted by multiple people. And what I love about ghostwriters is this book, I'm really not talking about my experiences. I'm talking to other people and their experiences. So that was a lot of fun. Edgar Allan Poe was spotted in Providence. Basically, he had this romantic affair with this woman in Providence at the Athenaeum, the library there, and the kind of courtship going on. He's been spotted outside of the library. And apparently, because he was a drunkard, he would drink and, I guess, shoot up morphine. She said no because he had proposed to her, and she said no. And so he apparently lurks outside of the library in Providence. He's been spotted at another location in New York City. It's called Il Buco, which is like a restaurant in New York City. There's this the cellar area that supposedly that's where he would drink when he lived in New York City. And so there's always my ghostwriters really goes into the inspiration for these characters, and it's been said when I get tours in Boston Harbor, for example, that Edgar Allan Poe was inspired by the Cask of the Amontillado by his when he served on Castle Island when it was known as Fort Independence. But it turns out he may have been inspired to write the Cask of the Amontillado while he was living in New York City. So really, he was all over the place. And people associate him with Baltimore, but really he left his mark literally all over, New England. So Providence, Boston, New York City, it was all over the place.
That's pretty cool, and to be able to uncover some of these stories and histories now, and kind of revisit and bring it to the foreground, especially when we can tie it to the paranormal. I think people are more willing. This is a great way to kind of reintroduce children to our past, giving them something fun to connect to.
Absolutely. That's why I started doing this. And when I first started writing books about the paranormal, it was about writing history books with ghost stories. That was my intention. And then it kind of went off into this really crazy direction. But with ghostwriters, I'm kind of coming back to my original intention, which is to write history and to turn the youngsters or turn the younger generation on to people like Edgar Allan Poe, and H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, H.P. Lovecraft is a major player. I was able to go to the Mark Twain's house in Hartford, Connecticut, and that was amazing. Being able to go to Mark Twain's or Samuel Clemens' house, and really seeing their architecture and connecting with the lingering legacy of Samuel Clemens in that house it was amazing. So I love this book. I love writing this book. I love visiting all these locations that I always wanted to visit, and I had a reason to visit them.
Marcus, through the wormhole, asks, what is the most haunted location that you've ever visited?
Well, that's a good question. So what out of all the places that I've visited, I would say without hesitation was the USS Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts. And I always do a thing called 13 Most Haunted in Massachusetts. And people think that Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast should be number one, but I always go for now I moved up to USS Salem. So I would say the USS Salem in Quincy, Massachusetts. I spent a month and a half on that vessel and saw all sorts of things, burning. There's an entity known as the Burning Man. So sailors, that shadow figures walking back and forth, children's spirits, all sorts of things on this vessel. And I recently was able to go back on, but I would say without hesitation, it's the USS Salem. And that's, to be honest with you, was what happened right before I got the possession or the entity manifestation or infestation that was featured on A Haunting. So that was what I was doing before I got this entity attachment.
Hello? Yeah, I'm sorry, cut out on me there. I said, why do you believe that it's so haunted?
I think that because it served as a triage during the Ionian earthquake in Greece, I think that it definitely that trauma psychically imprinted itself on the vessel. It never saw a battle, but it saw a lot of death, and I think that psychic imprint is still lingering there. I also think that because they put a haunted attraction on a haunted vessel, it really upset the spirit. So my experience on that vessel was when it was a haunted attraction in addition to being a haunted vessel. So it was a haunted house. So I saw things that were probably the spirits wanting to get us off the vessel. So that's why I think the spirits were really wanting to get everyone off of it. That's why it's so haunted.
Okay. And now you said Lizzie Borden, I actually had a chance to stay multiple nights there and had a great time and very weird experiences. What can you tell me about that? I mean, is that something that you've had experiences with as well, or are you just going off of the legend and lore of how haunted it is?
No, I've spent many nights there. I did an event called Paranormal Showdown where we had two groups of investigators where we kind of, we investigated it and kind of had a decided there was, after doing a night of investigating, the group with the best evidence, either Team Sam or the other Team Lucky or Team PXP, and actually won. So we had the best evidence from the investigation event. But yeah, I would say that my experience that when I first walked in, I saw a shadow figure dart by at the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast. There's definitely something down in the basement there. I had the experience with the ghost kids on the top floor lifting my legs. That's a kind of a Tim Weisberg trick that everyone does. But yeah, multiple experiences there. I do think that there has been a lot of stuff that's been conjured by other investigators, and getting back to the whole idea of either like baggage, like people bringing their own baggage and dumping it off there, or causing stuff kind of like being that's already existing there that kind of is responding to all the paranormal groups coming in to investigate. It kind of makes it more haunted.
Almost like a lighthouse, a beacon to all of these other things.
Right. I mean, like if you investigate it every night, and there are spirits there, it's gonna be active. It's stirring the pot on a regular like every day. It's like it's been investigated like on a daily basis. So of course it's going to be haunted. And I've had the ghost act kind of on command. It's kind of creepy actually when you see a shadow figure walk by when you walk into the house, or you have your feet lifted up when you're on the top floor of the bed and breakfast. I feel like because it's so active and investigated so much that it's almost like a ghost freak show kind of setup. And I hate to say that. I love the Lizzie Borden Bed and Breakfast, but the ghosts act on command there.
And Eric asks, what are your top 3 locations that are still on your bucket list to get into?
Well, that's a good. So now that I've discovered that I pick up bad entities, I have to be really careful. I said that I would never do asylums, and I don't know why I'm so terrified of asylums. I think that maybe the fact that like the Danvers Asylum, Session 9, I think was the name of it, that movie terrified me. And it was a movie that was shot locally at the Danvers Insane Asylum. So I would say, like when it comes to locations where I really want to go to, definitely more not asylums, not like hospitals or anything that I know would have that lingering negative energy to it. But I'm thinking more like Queen Mary on the West Coast, a lot of West Coast locations, because I love the West Coast. Queen Mary would be one. I would say definitely I love history. So anywhere where there's a major historical backstory, and I would love to go to England and kind of see where my ancestors came from, and sort of like the witch trials backstory in England. So any location in England with a tie to the Salem witch trials would be really interesting. And there's supposedly this very beautiful little church in England that has ties to the witch trials that I would love to visit. And I would say like definitely at other countries with history that may mimic the history that I know here in New England. So anything with witch trials history, I would love to go and check it out.
Are there any locations that have just flat out refused you entry?
No, I mean, I come in with the idea. So like, if you go in with like your investigation equipment and say like, hey, we're going to investigate this location, absolutely, I've been turned down with that, like doing events, because I do paranormal conventions. I produce paranormal conventions, and I have been turned down for the paranormal convention. But if you go in as someone that's staying at the Stanley Hotel, when I went to the Stanley Hotel, I went on the ghost tour, but as you may, I don't know if you know this or not, but they don't allow paranormal investigations there. But I did anyway. I investigated anyway. So if you pay for the room, you get in. But I have definitely been turned down. Salem is notorious about anything paranormal related. They're going to turn their backs on you. And when all the shows they come and they want it, every Travel Channel paranormal TV show wants to do a Salem episode, and they come to me because I know where to go. But the thing is, there's a reason why they turn their backs on the paranormal TV shows, because they get the history incorrect, and they like walk into a show that came in and took over the witch house, which is our historic. It dates back to the 1600s, and it's the Jonathan Corwin house. The show came in, just like broke a chair, destroyed this beautiful historic home with their production, and like that leaves us like that is going to close the doors to other productions. So anything that is around Salem, because of that TV show coming in and destroying the property, they close their doors to TV shows, especially, but not to me because I've written books on it.
Yeah, I've been to the Queen Mary, fascinating place, interesting energy, and I've seen and witnessed some great phenomena there. That's very exciting for people like us that are into that. The Queen Mary has never let me down. The Stanley, I was lucky enough, I was the first ones to start doing live events there. So I was pretty much in residence there for almost 4.5 years of visiting,
right,
and did our final event in November of 2012, our end of days event. And it was, it was always great. It was a great place to visit. And I know that they seem to go back and forth on allowing paranormal investigations to happen or not.
Right.
But overall, that was a pretty remarkable place as well. Have you ever made it out to Waverly Hills or Rolling Hills Asylum?
Yeah, Rolling Hills, like anything with a hospital, I stay away from. So Rolling Hills, I even though I feel like I need to go there, it is a beautiful location. I like seeing it from from afar and not actually going there. But I will tell you, in my new book, Mass Murders, and I'm working on that now, I do a lot of the what's remaining of the asylums in Massachusetts, and as you probably know, a lot of the asylums have been torn down and turned into luxury condos, and generally. But there's a few buildings that are still lingering. So I have done, for this book, I've kind of opened my mind to doing hospitals and doing asylums, and I definitely did investigate the Met, which is a hospital, a former asylum in Massachusetts, in Lexington and Waltham, and I went to me, was one of the most terrifying locations. To me, it was terrifying, but have I been there? No. Do I want to go? I probably will end up going to Rolling Hills because I feel like I'm called to it, but I haven't done it.
Rolling Hills is an interesting place. It wasn't really an asylum per se, as it was just kind of a catch-all. Homeless people, unmarried women, some mentally challenged people, things like that. So it's definitely a crazy place. I saw some of the most fascinating shadow activity there, and certainly could hear whispers. That's, I would say, if you really like interesting places, and I can't say I've ever encountered anything dark there, but there's there's certainly a lot of activity that seems to take place there.
So you don't consider shadow figures dark?
I don't. Like I said, it's, to me, I think they're kind of an echo of what was there, or just all that they could collect. I've got a pretty good fight or flight ability, and, sensing something that means to do me harm, getting my hackles up, happens. But it's very rare when it comes to actual shadow people encounters. That's why they fascinated me so much. And talking to people all over the world about their encounters, very few are actually afraid of them. They're just more in shock and awe. And then once that passes, they kind of get past it. I think we're just predetermined to believe it's evil because it's dark.
Right.
Doesn't mean that there aren't some darklings out there as well that are a little, unnerving. But overall, shadows don't impact me that way.
Well, especially if they have red eyes, and that probably is a warning sign. But I had an experience with shadow figures or shadows moving in the downstairs of the Oliver House in Middleborough, and that's kind of been like the hot spot for investigation. I was able to investigate there last November, and they have shadows, and like that those shadows are actually, I think, they could be like the Underground Railroad kind of thing. And you actually see that or hear that a lot when there's anything with ties to the Underground Railroad. You'll see like shadow manifestations there. So I don't think that those are evil. I think they're just kind of lingering echoes from the past.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left. Why don't you regale us with one or two more of your favorite stories that you've collected over the years?
Well, again, I go from book to book to book. So I definitely, with ghostwriters, I'm excited about the way it turned out. But I think for mass murders, I think that for me that I'm uncovering a lot of interesting things. So, for example, when I first started writing ghost books back in like early 2000s, I was a magazine. I worked for a magazine, and I was they put me up in this hotel in Provincetown, Massachusetts, and they were like, hey, this is kind of a rundown flop house, but this is all that's available this weekend. It was during the Provincetown International Film Festival, so I was staying at it's called the Victoria House, and the night that I was staying there, this is before I even wrote about ghost lore. I heard what sounded like a scream, like a woman screaming from the closet. And I opened the door and there was nobody there. It turns out that is where Tony Chop Chop Costa, who was a serial killer in the late 1960s, that is where he met two of his victims before taking them and killing them and then cutting them up into pieces with a hatchet and then crudely burying them in the secret garden in Truro. So I didn't know that location was where he met his victims and where he stayed. So the room that I was staying in was actually his room. And so I felt like that was my beginning of the paranormal as far as like writing about it and kind of like using the ghosts, letting the ghosts guide me. And that's a perfect example of me kind of connecting with the spirits and then the spirits having that experience 10 years ago and still talking about this case and finding out more and more information, going to the location where he buried the bodies and spending time there investigating there. That case is definitely going to be a major player in my new book, Mass Murders, coming up. And then also the Lady of the Dunes case happened in Provincetown, which I have written about before, but hopefully getting new evidence where we can maybe give this woman a name. I would love to do that.
Sounds fantastic. And please keep us in mind when you get into that. We're always interested in the true crime elements as well, and would love to visit with you again at that point.
Absolutely. I'm really interested in hopefully giving a voice to the victims. That's my goal.
That's great. Sam Baltrusis, our guest. Thank you so much for being here this evening, Sam.
Thank you so much, Dave.
All right. That about wraps it up for another evening, kids. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. I'll be back with you again tomorrow. And Jay Wexler joins us. Satan and the Rise of the Religious Rights. An interesting conversation we'll have with law professor Jay Wexler. He appeared as the legal expert on the new provocative film Hail Satan. And we're going to discuss how atheists, Satanists, pagans, and others are demanding their rightful place in public life, religious liberty, alternative religions, and how this all fits in with the First Amendment and the church-state challenges in the United States law. Greg Kaiser will join us in the third hour tomorrow night. Super-aware intelligence machines. Greg will share several hypotheses about how super-aware intelligence machines will emerge and engage with humanity, engaging your mind, engaging your imagination. That's what we do here every night, Monday through Friday. Thank you for tuning in.
And I hope that you'll continue listening and subscribe now to the best in anomalous talk radio. Never miss another minute in our archived episodes. You get brand new episodes. You get over 20 new episodes every month, multiple hours of fantastic conversations. I hope that you'll check it out. Subscribe now at midnightinthedesert.com. That's it for tonight. We'll see you again here tomorrow on the best in anomalous talk radio. This is Midnight in the Desert. I'm Dave Schrader, and honey, I'm coming home.
Midnight in the desert, shooting stars across the sky. This magical journey will take us on a ride, filled with the longing, searching for the truth. Will we make it till tomorrow? Will the sun shine on you? Midnight in the desert, and we're listening. Ooh, we're listening to you. Midnight in the desert.